Welcome back, everyone. No matter where you are, no matter what time it may be, I hope y'all are doing well out there. You might notice a bit of a change in some of the background video on this one. I've just been struggling a bit lately, mentally, of course. And I'm honestly getting a little tired of constantly looking over my shoulder and staring into the dark woods, trying to make sure nothing's out there watching me. I just needed a bit of a break, so some of the places I go to sometimes to edit or clear my head are places I actually recorded some video for y'all. I hope you guys enjoy these backgrounds, as they're places of peace for me. Now they are, some of them in a public park. So if you hear any lawnmowers or voices in the background, there's not much I can do about that. Anyway, this episode will follow a theme, a dangerous one at that. These aren't your typical sightings. These are people who tried to fight one of these creatures. Some of them pull the trigger, some swing whatever weapon they had. A few stood their ground, and most of us would have turned and run, let's be honest. The results. You'll hear them for yourself, but it proves one thing. If these creatures are flesh and blood, they're far tougher than anything else in the wild. Thank y'all for being here, and thank you for the continued support. Lock in, and let's begin. Everyone grab a drink, lock your doors and windows, hit the lights, and let's get started. My name's Carl. I'm 52 years old. I've lived my whole life in northern Arkansas. I've been an electrician most of my life and do a lot of side jobs here and there for people that I know personally. Now, I'm not a hunter by any stretch, but I've owned rifles and shotguns since I was a teenager. Around here, you don't really get by without at least having a gun in your house. Back in '06, I had an encounter that I don't really know how to process or put into words very well. I was at my cousin's house. He lives in the sticks outside of Melbourne. He asked me to come help him pull the rear axle out of an old Ford truck he was scrapping. It was getting dark, but I figured it wouldn't take more than an hour or so, and we had the tools laid out in his yard. His house sits right on the edge of a wood lot, with maybe 30 yards of grass before the tree line. We'd been working about a half an hour when we both noticed everything went quiet. His dog, just a mutt that he named Ranger, started pacing with his hair bristled up. I thought probably a coyote was hanging around, so I went inside his house and grabbed his old 12-gauge. As soon as I came back outside, I saw something step out of the trees and just stand statue still. I kid you not, Reels, this looked like Andre the Giant wearing a wolf mask. This thing was tall, shoulders like a tank. Its legs were bent funny with long arms hanging almost past its knees. Its head was shaped similar to a German shepherd, but it was much thicker, much bigger. My cousin, he saw it as well, and he didn't freeze right away. But I shouldered the shotgun and fired a round into the dirt right in front of it. I still didn't know if this could be a person. I didn't really know what to think. The blast of that shotgun echoed through the hollow, but it didn't even flinch. Instead, it slowly lowered itself, almost like it was going into some kind of aggressive stance. My cousin screamed for me to shoot it, so I pulled my aim up a bit higher and pulled the trigger again. This time I was aiming high for the chest. The bullet hit. I saw its skin and body ripple, and it staggered like it had been shoved a little. It didn't drop at all. It started growling this sound. I can't understand how something could make a sound this powerful. It felt like it went through the ground. It turned and ran off into the woods way faster than anything I've ever seen move. We didn't stick around. We threw the tools in the bed of his truck, locked everything up, and both spent the night at my place in town. To this day, I don't really know what we saw. I've worked on farms. I've seen every animal you can think of. But this thing wasn't a regular animal, and I don't believe it to be a person. A human cannot take a shot to the chest from a 12 gauge and run away, especially at speeds I saw. The face was too human. The way it stood there, it felt like it understood what I was about to do with that gun. Sometimes I wonder if they're flesh and blood animals that just don't die easily, or if there's something else altogether. The way it shrugged off that buckshot makes me think maybe they're more than just animals. Either way, if you see this, like me, you'll never forget how heavy that silence is before it steps out, or the sounds that it makes when it growled at us. Thanks, Reels. Hello, Reels. As I stated previously, you can use my name if you're comfortable. My name is Derek. I'm 38 now, but this happened when I was 23. I grew up in a small town outside of Missoula, Montana. My family has a pretty big ranch, and I still help on the ranch today. Out here carrying a rifle is just part of life. You never know if you'll run into a bear, a cougar, or even a sick steer you've got to put down. Nature is sometimes gruesome. One evening, it was late in the spring, I was sent to check the irrigation pumps near the back end of our property. It's a low stretch along the Bitterroot River. The tree line is thick for miles and miles. I had my dad's 30-30 lever action on my shoulder, mostly just out of habit. As I walked up, I noticed something odd. The pump wasn't running, but I could hear splashing. At first I thought it was a deer crossing, but when it got closer I saw something crouched by the water. It was massive, with its back hunched and shoulders rising and falling like it was breathing very heavy. I sat there and watched as it stood up in one motion taller than any man I've ever seen, with that same wolf head like I've only ever seen described in stories online. Its fur was patchy, almost mangy, and its arms were too long and very muscular. I should have backed off right then and there, but it was too late. It spotted me instantly and started heading my way. Instinct kicked in. I shouldered the rifle and fired immediately. The first shot hit square in the chest. I saw the impact. I saw blood. It snarled and barely staggered and charged. I worked the lever as fast as I could, firing 2 more times before it closed the gap. I'm a pretty good shot. I'm not bragging, it's just fact. I've had to be. I didn't have a choice. One of those shots clipped its shoulder. I saw more blood spray. It didn't stop. I dropped the rifle and pulled out a .357 revolver that I carried on my hip. I fired 3 more times. Maybe 15 feet away, it skidded to a stop. It curled its lips back, bared its teeth, and its breathing was ragged. I could tell it was injured. It turned, almost on a dime, and sprinted into the woods so fast the brush barely even moved as it went through. I just stood there shaking, my ears still ringing from the shots. The pump was smashed. It was twisted like it had been yanked out of place. I didn't dare hang around there. I ran straight back to the house and told my dad. Now, sometimes I hear stories where people don't believe you or they laugh. My dad didn't laugh, but he also didn't say much about it. He just told me to stay out of that stretch of woods for a while. Now I still carry a sidearm everywhere I go, even on the ranch. That night changed me. I've killed deer, elk, coyotes. I'm a hunter. I know what it looks like when something gets hit hard. I know what it looks like when something is fatally wounded. Whatever that was, it should have been dead, but it wasn't. I go back and forth on what I believe here. Part of me thinks there's some kind of relic predator that's just hard to kill. Another part of me wonders if there's something spiritual, because no living, breathing, flesh and blood creature should have walked away from 7 bullets. Well-placed bullets, I might add. What bothers me the most is that it didn't seem to be afraid of me until the very last second. It acted like it had the upper hand the whole time. That truly bothers me. What the hell are these things, Reels? Derek. If you share this on the channel, my name is irrelevant. I'm 44, and I live on a few acres outside Rutherfordton, North Carolina, not far from the South Mountains. I make my living repairing small engines out of a shop I built behind my house. Mowers, chainsaws, four-wheelers, dirt bikes, anything and everything that has a small engine and a bad attitude. Now, it's not the salary of a doctor, but it keeps the lights on and lets me be around for my wife and 2 kids. I also volunteer with the fire department when they need an extra set of hands. Around here, you pay your way and you help your community and your neighbors. I'm not writing because I want attention. I'm writing because I can't shake the feeling that I made a bad call one night, and I'm trying to make sense of what I did and what I saw, and hopefully try to have someone avoid making these same mistakes in the future. We keep a handful of goats and a run of chickens behind the shop. My kids sell eggs to a couple of folks from church, and my wife's proud of those birds like they're her 3rd and 4th children. We started losing hens, not all at once. One here, another there, and something kept dragging the galvanized trash can lid off the feed barrel at night. I blamed raccoons. I reinforced the latch, put a cinder block on top, and figured that was that. About 2 weeks later, my oldest came in from the yard, white as a sheet, and said he'd found big dog tracks by the burn pile. I told him it was probably the neighbor's new shepherd, and I'd talk to them. I went out with him anyway. The impressions were too big for a shepherd. The pads were just huge. But they were narrow, and the spacing wasn't what I expected. The ground had been damp and torn up by the kids' boots, so I just convinced myself I was seeing it wrong. The night this all happened, my wife had taken the kids to her sister's in Forest City for a sleepover. I stayed back to get through a backlog of string trimmers on the bench. It was one of those early November nights when the temperature drops hard after the sun dips. The air smells like leaf smoke and cold dirt. I had the shop bay rolled up for ventilation. Radio was on low. Hands were covered in grease. Around 11, I killed the lights and stepped out to lock up the coop. The yard was quiet, not silent. You could still hear a few insects, and one of the goats snorted and shuffled around, but it had that contained, held breath feeling you notice when a storm is coming or when something's out there watching. I had my old Remington 870 leaning by the back door loaded with number 4 buck. I never used to carry it just to lock the coop, but after the missing hens, I'd gotten into a habit to try and neutralize whatever this was. When I got close to the chicken run, the goats all crowded to the far end of their pen and stared past me, their ears pinned flat to their head. I looked, trying to see what they were looking at. I saw what I thought was a person standing between 2 sweet gum trees near the compost bins. Tall, shoulders like a linebacker under a shaggy coat. Head turned a little to the side like it was sniffing or trying to get a scent of something. Then the head tipped forward, the ears stood off like spear points. I realized I was looking at a muzzle. I realized I was looking at some freak, canine creature. I'm not some arrogant tough guy, but I don't scare easily. But I'll admit, in that minute, my knees felt hollow. The thing moved and shifted its weight, and it wasn't pretending to be anything else. It was out in the open, upright, heavy through the chest. The snout looked too thick for a wolf and too long for a bear. The eyes caught what little porch light spilled out that way and glowed a flat, sickly yellow. It had a robotic stare. What I mean by that is it never blinked, not once. I racked a shell into the shotgun, not to show off like I'm John Wick or any scare tactics, just because I wanted it to be ready. I called out, "Hey, get out of here," really loud. That usually works on strays or any animal. Most animals don't want to fight. This one didn't move. The chicken wire rattled behind me where the hens were rustled and panicking in their roost as if they knew better than I did what was about to happen. I fired a warning shot to the left off into the dirt. The shot bounced back off the side of the shop and rolled up the hill. Its ears twitched a little, that was about it. No flinch, no turn, it just lowered a little, like it was settling into a crouch, and the sound it made didn't fit anything in my brain. It was low and close, and inside my ribs like a big diesel engine idling under my feet. That sound shot the fear of God in me, and I was afraid for my life. So I fired a shot at its chest, center mass. I've put down hogs, dogs that's been hit by cars. I know the difference between a near miss and a hit. The pattern hit. I watched its fur buckle and I saw it rock backwards. Its mouth opened, but it never yelped or screamed. It was more like it was about to bite the air in front of it. Then it came forward in 2 long steps. I fired again, fast, and started backing toward the shop so I wouldn't trip in the ruts near the coop. The second hit turned its shoulder. It swiped at the wire fence like it was frustrated or ticked off. It tore a strip of it loose, then set its foot over the fence and stepped down into my yard. I could see this thing's muscles and its legs through the coat of fur. Thick cords like a runner's calves, only a lot bigger. It stank like wet dog and old hay. I didn't wait for it to get close. I put the bead where the neck met the chest and shot a third time. That shot changed its mind. It jerked sideways, dropped to all fours for a heartbeat, then stood upright again and moved back toward the shadow between the trees with a smooth, rolling stride that made no sense to watch. This thing wasn't stumbling, it wasn't panicked, it didn't even seem to be injured at all. It just seemed like it was done with me and leaving because it just felt like leaving. I wanted to believe I'd chased off a big feral dog, but dogs don't step over fences. They jump or knock them down. Dogs don't grab mesh and pull when they get mad. And dogs hit with 2 or 3 loads of buckshot don't keep that steady. I mean, posture like they are wondering if all of this is even worth the effort. As soon as it went back into the trees, I backed into the shop, hit the bay switch, and dropped the door. My hands were shaking enough that I had trouble getting the deadbolt on the service door. I picked up the landline and called my neighbor. He runs cattle up the road. I told him something big was prowling and he might want to bring his calves in close. He asked if it was a cat or a bear. I said, I don't know what this is. The line got quiet for a second, and he said he'd bring the truck down. We did a pass with spotlights and found prints in the damp spots by the coop. They were longer than any canine print. You could make out 3, maybe 4 toe tips where they'd pressed into the mud. The stride distance wasn't right for a dog either, not the way they were laid out. There were tufts of dark hair on the barbs of the fence where it had reached. Eddie's first comment was that someone must have been messing with us in a costume. Then he saw where the buckshot had peppered the shed wall behind where it was standing. Those pellets that didn't hit flesh, and he didn't repeat the costume theory again after that. He stayed in the truck with the motor running while I grabbed the strongest magnet I own and ran over the ground where I'd shot to see if I could pick up pellets that hit dirt. I found 3. That didn't make me feel better. I wanted to see blood. There wasn't any, not a drop I could find. That's impossible. We debated on calling the sheriff, but why? When a thing like a dog on 2 legs comes into your yard and ignores 3 shots from a 12-gauge. I could see the report now, and I could see the look on the deputy's face even clearer. My friend said he'd sit at the end of my drive for a few hours and keep an eye on the road. I stepped back inside and locked every latch and door I own. My wife got home around noon the next day. I told her we might have a bear problem, one nosing around, and that I wanted the kids to stay inside after dark for a while. I fixed the torn section of the fence with heavier gauge wire and moved the feed barrel into the shop. The goats didn't settle for 3 nights. They'd face that corner at dusk and stamp. And even the buck wouldn't challenge the others for space. The 4th night they settled like normal. Whatever it was, thankfully, had moved on. At least, for the time being, anyway. From what I've learned, these things tend to stick around and sometimes even return, especially after you've shot them. I would like to tell you that letting loose with the shotgun made me feel better, like I had some control. It didn't. I counted 3 loads square in that thing's front half, and all I did was convince it not to keep coming. I don't know how thick the skin on something has to be to take that kind of punishment and stay standing. But I've never seen it on anything I've hunted or had to put down. I swapped the number 4 buckshot for slugs after that night. I added 2 more motion lights and a cheap camera over the goat pen. The camera never caught anything but stray cats and the neighbor's hound nosing around. Part of me is relieved, and part of me checks those clips every morning like a habit that I can't quit. My kids don't know the details, or they didn't until a few weeks later when my son asked why I'd installed lights that made our yard look like a used car lot. I told him we had some sort of predator that wasn't afraid of people and that if he ever sees something tall in the yard, he needs to get inside first, ask questions later. Now, I'm not one of those people that lies to my kids. They asked. I told the truth. So they would be ready if they saw it. My wife and I argued once about selling the goats, but we ended up keeping them. Maybe that's stubbornness. Maybe it's trying not to let fear run the place. As for what it was, I don't buy the idea of ghosts or demons. I'm not dismissing anyone who does. I respect your opinions. I just can't put that outfit on an animal that leaves hair on fence barbs and prints in the mud. It felt physical to me. It was breathing, and I could smell it. But calling it a regular animal doesn't work either. Regular animals bleed when you hit them that hard. And they either drop or they run like the world's on fire. This one evaluated me. That's the word I keep coming back to. It weighed the scenario, the situation, pressed its luck, then walked away when it decided it wasn't worth the effort. If you want my honest opinion, which I'll give here, I think there are pockets in these hills where things survive that don't show themselves very often. Something with brains and muscle that's learned that we're dangerous but not unbeatable. I can live with that idea better than the other ones. It gives me something I can prepare for. Locks, lights, bigger guns if it comes to that. What I'm having trouble with is the memory of that moment between my second and third shot, when it had its foot over that fence and kept coming anyway. I don't care what a man says about being brave. When you meet something that does not put you at the top of the food chain, your body understands it faster than your head does. I still walk the property sometimes at night when I have to, but I don't dawdle. I don't listen to the radio with the bay open anymore, and I don't mistake quiet for safety. If it comes back, I'll do what I have to do. I hope I never have to find out whether slugs makes a difference. Anonymous. Reels. I'm 36 years old now, but this happened when I was only 24. My name is Adrian. Yes, that's my real name. I don't care, I have nothing to hide. I grew up in the Central Valley of California, near Fresno. Back then I worked for a construction outfit. They took on whatever jobs nobody else wanted. Foundations, pole barns, fencing, even cabin repair up in the mountains. We didn't make a ton of money, but the work kept me outside, and for a young guy with energy to burn, that was good enough. In the summer of 2013, we were hired to reinforce an old vacation cabin up in the Sierra Nevadas. The owner lived down in Los Angeles and only came up a few times a year, so the place had gone neglected. It sat on a narrow dirt road between ponderosa pines and granite outcroppings, about 40 minutes from the nearest town. There was no cell service, no neighbors in sight. I'd volunteered to stay a couple nights at the cabin to watch over the tools and materials that we'd hauled up there, mostly because I was single and needed the extra money. The first night, uneventful. I cooked some canned chili on a camp stove and listened to the forest settle. I slept in my sleeping bag on the porch. Slept like a baby, honestly. The second night changed me entirely. It was just after 11. I'd been sitting on the porch steps with my boots unlaced, staring at the trees. Normally the Sierras hum at night, crickets, owls, wind and the needles, but it had gone strangely still and quiet. The kind of still that makes your ears strain because you realize what you're not hearing. I chalked it up to altitude or nerves or a combination of both. That is, until I heard a sharp crack. Sounded like a branch snapping. Then another one. It got closer. I stood up and grabbed the .270 rifle that I'd brought with me, more for predators than anything else. I caught some low movement, something dark, moving from tree to tree. From that distance and with that low lighting, it kind of looked like a black bear. But when it stepped into the light a little more across the clearing, my heart dropped. This thing was upright. Its arms were huge but long and hanging low. Its chest was super broad, and its arms ended in long fingered hands. The head was unmistakable. A wolf. This had to be a Dogman. There's nothing else that explains it. I don't know how long we stared at each other, but it felt like my lungs forgot how to work. It stepped closer slowly and closing the gap between the pines and the edge of the clearing. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what to do. I raised the rifle and screamed, "Get out of here." My voice was cracked. The creature just stared. It tilted its head like a dog that was puzzled by a sound. I fired. One shot. I saw the round connect high on its shoulder. The way it staggered, there's no doubt in my mind. The reaction was not what I expected. Instead of charging like a predator or dropping like wounded game, it let out a sharp, almost yipping bark and ran sideways, not away into the woods, but in a panicked zigzag, crushing through undergrowth like it didn't care what noise it made. This thing was fast. Faster than anything of that size. I worked the bolt faster than I ever have and put another round in the chamber, shouldered the gun. I was waiting for it to circle back. The forest exploded with sound, branches breaking, rocks tumbling down slope, and then silence again. Obviously, there was no sleeping for me. Every crunch of pine needles set me on edge. As soon as the sun came up, I forced myself to check the trees. About 30 yards in, I found a streak of blood sprayed across a granite boulder. It was darker than deer blood and a lot thicker. There were also deep impressions in the dirt where it had torn off. Each print was not even recognizable as fast as it took off. But it unsettled me. Well, the way the thing stopped. About 50 yards further in, the tracks just ended. There was no more blood, no more impressions, there was nothing. It's like the thing had launched itself or just simply disappeared. I followed the trail as far as I had enough courage, but the woods grew dense and quiet again. I backed out, and I didn't go back. I'm brave, but I'm not stupid. When the crew came back up that afternoon, I didn't say a word at first. I told them I'd heard something messing with the trash cans and fired a warning shot, but that wasn't the truth. Later, one of the older guys noticed a blood streak on the rock and asked if I'd shot a bear. I just shrugged and said it must have been a coyote hit by a stray round. He didn't press me, but the look he gave said that he wasn't buying it. For weeks after that, I dreamed about that thing. Not the sight of it standing there, but the way it panicked. The way it yipped like a dog, caught doing something wrong. That reaction just didn't fit this creature. Predators don't behave like that, not at that size. My theory? These things aren't all the same. Some may be killers. Some may be territorial. But the one I shot at was like a spooked animal that didn't want a fight. That almost makes me feel bad. because it means they have personalities and temperaments just like wolves or coyotes. I still go into the mountains, but never alone, and I never go unarmed, and I would suggest no one else does either. That night convinced me there's something living out there in the Sierras that doesn't belong on any hunting report. My name is just a good old boy from Texas. I'm 51, and I've been working my whole life down in Llano County, Texas. My granddad started this place after World War II, and it's been in the family ever since. We've got about 200 head of cattle spread over a few hundred acres, mixed pasture. Life out here's simple, but it's definitely not easy. If you don't keep on top of things, the land and the livestock will eat you alive. I've dealt with every aggravating predator you can think of, coyotes being my absolute worst. Occasionally a big cat would drift down from the hill country, but it wasn't often enough for you to even concern yourself with it. You lose a calf sometimes, you cuss, you patch the fence, and you move on. That's the deal you sign when you run cattle. But in the summer of 2018, I had a run-in with something that didn't fit into any box. And the way it reacted when I tried to drive it off keeps me up most nights. We'd been losing a lot of goats from the smaller side pasture. They weren't just getting picked off, they were getting ripped apart. Coyotes, they have messy kills, but they don't tear things in half. One doe was found with her back legs completely gone, like something had yanked her straight in two. Another was left shredded near the fence, guts hanging but nothing eaten. That didn't sit right with me. Predators kill for food, not for sport. This felt like it was about sending a message. My wife begged me to pin the goats closer, but I'm just stubborn, I suppose. I figured I could handle whatever it was. I moved my cot into the old tack room that backed onto the goat pens. I strung up some extra lights and had a Winchester 30-06 and a box of ammo within arm's reach. It was late July, hotter than the blazes even after dark. I was half dozing on the cot when the goats erupted. Not their usual nervous bleating, they were screaming. I jumped up, grabbed the rifle, and busted the door open. The yard light was throwing off a pale circle, and just outside that circle near the fence, something was moving. This thing looked just like a human being, crouched low and sneaking. Then it rose up, too tall to be a human being, too broad across the chest to be a man. It had a long snout and ears pinned forward like a wolf about to strike. The light caught the fur on its chest. It was thick, black. It was nasty looking, like it had been in the water. It was matted with mud, sticks, and God only knows what else. It had human-shaped hands that reminded me of an extra-large raccoon paw. I screamed out as loud as I could and fired about 20 feet over its head. I gave it a chance. I gave it a warning shot. Any normal animal would have ran. This thing roared. I mean deep, guttural, rolling roar, and slammed the fence with both hands, like it was saying, "Try me." Dust flew up from the rails. The goats scattered in a panic, climbing over each other in the far corner of the pen. I chambered another round and said okie dokie and fired into its chest. The recoil on that gun was pretty rough. I swear I saw it jerk, but instead of running, it charged the fence. It grabbed one of the cedar posts and ripped it clean out of the ground and threw it. That was a treated post, sunk 3 feet deep into clay. It shouldn't have came up like a broom handle.
It paced the fence line, dragging another post that it had snapped off. It was still growling low and still looking dead at me. I felt like I was in a standoff with something that wasn't afraid of me at all, wasn't afraid of the rifle, but also wasn't reckless enough to take another shot. It was showing me what it could do. I definitely took note, and that's why I fired again, this time into its left shoulder. I could hear the bullet slap meat. It screamed again. It was a booming, barking sound, and it hurled that cedar post into the pen. It landed so hard one of the boards on the goat shed snapped. The goats went insane, bleating and crashing against the panels. At that point, I'll admit, I knew it was time for me to retreat to the tack room. My hands were slick with sweat, my heart was hammering like a piston. I wasn't sure if the shots were hurting it or just pissing it off. The creature stalked along the fence a while longer, keeping pace with me like it was debating, thinking about just climbing over and coming after me. Its head was turning side to side, it was sniffing the air. I had the rifle leveled on it the whole time, but I couldn't bring myself to shoot again unless it crossed that line. Its eyes were narrowed and glowing yellow. It was definitely pissed. Finally, it let out a long huff, almost like a bull snorting, and turned back toward the brush. It didn't just leave. It slammed another section of the fence on its way out, hard enough to leave the cedar rails just dangling. Then it just vanished into the oak scrub, moving fast and quiet. I still don't know how something that big can move that fast, that silently. You would have to be a complete madman to chase it. I stayed in that tack room for the rest of the night. Every time the goats stirred, I would look out and thought for sure that it was coming back, but it never did. There were a total of 3 posts yanked loose. I found a few splashes of something dark on the dirt, but when I touched them, they weren't blood. It was more like this foul-smelling muck. It was greasy and black. I've never seen anything like it. I replaced the post with steel T-bars and doubled the wire. I moved the goats closer to the house and ran new floodlights. Now this is the part where most people, my wife included, would insist that we sell the animals, the house, the property, and just leave. But I can't stomach the idea of being bullied off my own land by something that isn't even supposed to exist. That fall, I lost 2 more goats. Both were found outside the pen. Their necks were broken, but they weren't eaten. It was the same message. This is my ground, not yours. After that, the activity stopped as sudden as it started. I still can't tell you what these things are, but I can tell you they are real, and guns don't seem to do much. This isn't a man, it's not a wolf, and it's not some kind of weird bear. It behaved like it owned that pasture. My shots didn't stop it. They didn't even make it run. It just seemed to get more angry every time I pulled that trigger. Angry enough to show me what it was capable of, and its sheer brute speed and strength. I have my own theories and opinions. I think these things are territorial predators, not mindless killers. But they're not just animals either. They know where their lines are, and if you cross them, they'll make damn sure that you understand. I think that night it decided that it just wasn't time for a fight, but it wanted me to know that it could have come through that fence if it wanted. I'm not ashamed to say I was scared, and I still am to this day, and I imagine I always will be after seeing that. When the goats get restless, I always catch myself grabbing that rifle and waiting for another one of those posts to snap off and to see that thing standing out there. God, please, I hope that never happens. But if it does, I'll do what I feel I need to do. A concerned man from Texas. Friends, legends, family. That's the end of tonight's encounters. These are people who stood their ground, who fired their shots, who tried to fight back against something most of us only hope we never see. Some, well, these, live to tell about it with nothing more than shaken nerves and the weight of knowing that their best efforts weren't enough to bring one of these things down. It makes you wonder if ordinary rifles and shotguns can even stop them at all. What exactly are we dealing with out there? A predator that we don't understand yet, or something built with a purpose beyond anything natural? I'll leave that for you to decide down in the comments below. I want to thank these individuals for sending me these encounters and trusting me to tell them to the best of my ability. Thank you. I also want to thank you all again for listening and for being here with me through this crazy nightmare. If you've had an encounter of your own and would like to share it with us here on the channel, please reach out to me and send me an email. I'd love to hear your story. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and join this great community. There are plenty more encounters on the way, y'all. Everyone, please stay safe out there. I love each and every one of you. Until next time, my friends, watch over your loved ones. Keep your head on a swivel. And as always, good night.